every country called me to play this record. And then that was the beginning of Joe Bataan becoming an international star. And it started with no money, and because these kids played a bomba on me.
We got the bomba back. We got the last laugh.
How does it make you feel to be called the king of Latin soul?
Well, you know, that was a tough one because, make no qualms about it, you know, everybody likes recognition. I'm no different. But when the coin, it was sort of a marketing approach. And this is where I was ahead of my time, where a lot of musicians didn't think out of the box. They just thought music. I thought the business-wise, I sold records in streets, I marketed it, I advertised, I did everything. So I thought about coining a title. Mm-hmm. And I said, not to sound arrogant, it couldn't come from me, but it did. So in Spain, we named the album King of Latin Soul. And it didn't catch on to here to later on. And I asked Tito Ramos one day, I said, you know, what do you think about this? He's the king of Latin. I feel odd about that. You know, it's like being arrogant, you know? He says, Bataan, they don't know what you went through. He says, if they knew your story, they would understand why. He said, for the things that you've done and how you went and approached it is a Cinderella story. He said, so you deserve it. So I felt better. That was coming from my friend, you know? And throughout the years, it started to build up. It started to make it as a legacy. And the one thing that I did I'm proud of is that I was known as a boogaloo artist. And I knew that the term boogaloo wouldn't last. It was bubblegum, right? Like you coin something and it disappears. But I said, if I call myself a Latin soul artist, that would last through the test of time because Latin won't go out of style and soul won't go out of style. And I was right.
Not like a lot of artists, you were able to navigate through a lot of different genres, from boogaloo to Latin soul, sal soul, and then into hip hop. How were you able to adapt through all those different styles of music?
You know, when I thought about that, and you think about how you become relevant, you have to find the nucleus of something that fits in with everyone. So it's a heartbeat, it's a pulse that everybody understands, it's universal. That's when you have a worldwide hit. Not many people attain that, right? And my travels, I started to realize that music is different all over the world. What you might like, I might not like, right? But if you find the secret of the pulse that everybody can relish, then you got something. And that happened to me with hip hop. I'm not a hip hop star, but I worked in a community center. I had been dormant for a while. You know, you have your ups and downs, and I was trying to work for a living in the center, and I was working with kids. I'm 40 years old now. My career is waning. And I go into the center, and the lights are down. And the kids are all dancing, 1,000 of them. I said, what the hell is this? And I'm scratching my head, and I say, what are they doing? And I hear this shuffling, cha, 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 to the beat. And I'm saying, holy cow. Where do these kids come from? He said, oh, they all pay $1. They come in here, and the guy's up there playing records. Playing records? So I looked up on the stage, and this kid is up there. It was Jekyll and Hyde, and he's spinning records, right? And I said, holy cow. I said, what is that? He said, I don't know. He said, you don't know? I said, is this on records? He says, no. No. Boom. Brainstorm. because I was always ahead of my time. Because the secret is that when I was young, I hung out with older people. And when I got older, I hung out with younger people. So I was always stagnant in the middle. The same thing happened when I was a counselor in the same place that I was locked up. I worked with kids, and they were always 15, but I kept getting older. But I always stayed relevant because I knew what these kids were talking about when they came in, got locked up, right? They would tell me their jargon, their ways of life, how they dressed, what they were doing. So I was hip. I was always in the pocket, right? So when I saw these kids playing in that center, I said, holy shit, excuse my language. I said, let me talk to those kids. They said, hey, you guys ever made records? He said, no. I said, I got an idea. I want to put this on records, you know? He said, okay. So they didn't know who the heck I was. They came up and I said, look, we're going to do this and name all the countries in the world. It's nationalism because people love when you talk about their country. And they said, yeah, okay, yeah. And then I said I had no money. I went and got credit at RCA. They said, oh, yeah, Joe, you could come in. And I don't know where I borrowed the money, and I did the music. I had everything set. And I called the kids. I said, okay, we're going to meet at RCA. Come on down. I said, man, I got to do this fast because they're going to catch on that this is going to be something new. Nobody knows about this. I was excited, right? And didn't have any money or nothing. And my career had been down for a while. And I went into the studio, and they didn't show up. And now I always travel with youngsters, you know, kids, you know, hang out. And I said, holy shit, excuse my language. I said, what the hell am I going to do? I borrowed this money, got the music here, and they didn't show up. So there was, in other words, in Spanish, it's bomba. They did a bomba on me. They weren't going to show up. Hell with him. We ain't doing shit with him. So I started thinking, I said, and I remember old stories of Jocko, he's an old DJ. He used to talk on the radio, even Frankie Crocker. And I said, I could do this. It's only talking. As I said, a new thing I'm going to make is sharp, got rhythm, got beat going, and the kids started going, clapping their hands. And I said, holy shit, I got this. I got this, remember? And I said, man, and I started to create. I said, let me put some background into this thing. And I got the girls to do it, and soon boom. And then I said, and I changed the instruments to something that they didn't hear. And I said, wow. And everybody was looking. And I said, these kids were dancing to me, and I'm 40, right? I took the record to the record companies, and they said, what's this, Joe? I said, something new. You got to hear it. He says, get out of here with that shit. I said, what do you mean? He says, you don't sing anymore? I said, no, but this is something new. He says, get out of here. So I kept going from company to company. And one guy said, I got to let this young kid hear this, you know? I said, wait a minute. You're going to get no young kid to listen to my music. I know what the hell's going on. He said, this kid knows. I said, what kid? So he brings up this kid, and he listens to the music. I had no idea who he was, but it was Larry Levant. If you ever know who Larry Levant was. Yeah. So I don't know who the hell he was. I said, who's this guy, man? He says, he heard the record. And then the guy said, he couldn't pay me. I said, well, hell, I'm taking my music out of here. I ran down the stairs, and the kid Larry Levant ran after me. Please, let me play that song in the garage. I said, who the hell are you? He said, I got a club in the garage in the village. And I said, so the word got out. I had some differences with South Soul, and I went back, and he heard that Larry Levant liked it. I didn't know this kid had this kind of influence. And he says, he liked it? He says, yeah. He says, let me hear it. He says, I'll put it out for you on RCA. I said, yeah, but he says, so I was having difficulty because I knew that somebody else was going to come, and it happened. Sugar Hill Guy came out with it. So I said, oh, man, if I don't put it out, I'm never going to have it. So he says, I'll give you $1, and you sign the contract, And then, you'll get the residual. So on the contract, just like I did with Morris Levy with Fania, I wrote in the bottom that he couldn't do anything with this outside of the United States. Brainstorm. Never knew what I was doing. So he took the contract, signed it. He played it in the garage. They sold 20,000 records the first week. Not on the radio, right? Before people were using record clubs, I was the first. Because I used to hang out at the discos. Nobody knew about discos and stuff like that, break dancing. I was one of the innovators of that stuff because I knew that I didn't have to go around the radio. I used to go to the clubs and bring my test pressings. So the record, he calls me up 2 weeks later, Joe, they want you to come to Holland. I said, for what? He said, that record is going to be a hit. I said, get out of here. How could it be a hit if they didn't even hear it? He said, they heard the record. I said, but they didn't play it. He said, they're going to play it. I said, so what am I going over there? He said, they want to put you on television. I said, you sure? He said, yeah. So the TV show was Music Latin, the biggest radio show in Europe, 40 million people. I went to Europe. I had no money, no outfit. I had a pair of black pants. I made a disco shirt, paid $3, and I put a roller skate on it. I bought a diamond for 50 cents, and I pasted it on, and then I got a pair of red suspenders. And off to Europe I went. I got there, and they said, okay, Joe, you're going to go on TV now? And when I got there, I forgot my shoes. I had these psychedelic track shoes. And I went on TV, and it became the rage of the country. This outfit that I had on that cost maybe $22, everybody started imitating.
That is so crazy.
And the next thing I brought rap music to Europe. And the record went #1, Germany, #2, France. Wow. I didn't get back home till 6 months later. Every country called me to play this record. And then that was the beginning of Joe Bataan becoming an international star. And it started with no money, and because these kids played a bomba on me.
They got the bomba back. You got the last laugh. Oh,
exactly. So this year is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about being one of the first to do it?
I felt a little sad about that because for a long time, I was never even recognized that I had did a rap song. There was a lot of racism in that also, right? When you think about it, Fatback Bang was first. Sugar Hill Gang came and I was third. Yeah, I forgot the other guy's name. He challenged me in Germany. Oh, what's his name?
Wait, they all came out the same year? Because I was hearing that your record came out first, but...
It came out first in Europe.
Oh, in Europe. Okay, clarify.
South America.
Okay.
But he came out, he beat me in New York. Fatback Bang didn't do that well, but they were the first, right? Sugar Hill came and exploded in New York. So I had it at the same time, but nobody would play mine, So when I got it, RCA released it in Europe ahead of Mickey and Sylvia, who had the label for Sugar Hill Gang, right? So they didn't have the resources for that, but they came later, and we battled, Unfortunately, they didn't make the money that I did. They were not abreast of what was going on, those young kids,
Toro Y Moi covered your song Ordinary Guy, Afro-Filipino. Chaz said about you, I was immediately hooked by Joe's music because to me, he represented the impossible. He felt so comfortable in his skin and he had so much confidence and appeal. Talk about that meeting with Chaz. And how did you feel when he first played you his version of your song?
Well, I got called from Gypsy, right? The restaurant, and he said, somebody wants to meet you. And I said, oh, who's meet me? He said, come down, we're going to eat some food. And it was Tori, and he came down with his friend. And I was sort of like taken back because, you're always, they say, when you start to arrive is when people try to emulate you or do things that you do. It's a blessing. Other people tend to frown on somebody doing your work. Not me. It's a compliment. And he said that he had done something, and when he played the record, I was amazed because I said, wow, look at how time generates. Here's another generation. And it made me feel proud that they understood what I was trying to do back when I was young. I can't explain the feeling, but it's like a big turnover. You finally got the message through, because you have to understand, when I was 19 and I was writing, I said, nobody's going to understand what the heck I'm trying to say. Like when I did songs like Mestizo, I had to research it. And it's mixed blood. I'm a Mestizo. Ordinary guy is what I was always been to this day. I don't put on airs with anybody. I enjoy what I do. I love what I do. I'm proud of what I've done. People can tell you, they're not happy when they hear their songs coming. You got to be kidding. I'm in seventh heaven when I hear my song on the radio or somebody playing my song or singing or talking about it. It just gives you a refreshing rejuvenation about your life and your journey. And when he played that, and then so there was a young kid, I said, this guy, what the heck does he know about me? And I'm 3 times, 4 times his age.
Well, he's another Afro-Filipino, too.
Yeah, unbelievable. And I'm amazed how his career has taken off. All the way on the West Coast, I keep hearing about him. He's a real busy guy, and I'm just so proud about it. Yeah.
How do you feel now that a whole generation of Filipino fans are now discovering your music and being proud of what you've accomplished?
Well, it was a long time coming, and it was the last part of my journey, because I grew up, Latinos were the first to embrace me, right? Puerto Ricans, Latinos, and Cubans and stuff like that. Then the African Americans embraced me secondly. And it wasn't until later on in my career that the Asians got women. It wasn't their fault, it wasn't my fault. It's just that nobody associated the two together, that I was part Asian and that I was making music. So when it came to light that there was some connection, my fan base started to build. And it started with a guy named Diaz in the Smithsonian. He called me up one day and he said, hey, Joe, we want to recognize you in the Smithsonian. I said, who, me? He says, yeah, you. I said, what about? He said, well, you're a bridge. You're a bridge to the Latin community, the African American community, and now the Asian community. And we'd like to recognize you in Washington. I said, well, you sure? He said, yeah. He said, we're even going to put your portrait in the National Museum right next to Maya Angelou, Michael Jackson. I said, get out of here, man. I said, I got to find a picture for you. So they did find a picture that was done in 1965, and it's there in the museum. And when he called me down to Washington, I went down with the band, and he said, Joe, we got a problem. I said, what? He says, even though the Latin community wants to recognize you, he said, the African-American community called us up and said, wait a minute, his mother's part black. We want to be there too, right? And I said, well, great, you know. And then a week passed, and then he got another call. He says, Joe, it's another problem. I said, what? He said, the Asian community just called. And they said, he's part Filipino. We want to be there too. So,
amazing.
I mean, it was like, wow, a Cinderella story. Here's this kid that came from a barrio in Spanish Harlem, didn't know anything about music, and I'm here in the Smithsonian ready to perform for 3 cultures, and I was recognized there. So that was one of the highlights of my life, and I'm very proud of that.
So last question, as a future ancestor, what would you want your legacy to be remembered by, and how do you really define the spirit of your career?
I thought about that. And then I heard something about Johnny Cash yesterday. And although you might think his story was about Folsom Prison or the things that he did in his life, it all comes down to spiritual. You know, and I thought about it, and I wrote my book, and I wrote about all the things that I did. Doesn't mean anything, because you see, what the world doesn't know and a lot of people don't know is that we don't own anything. Everything belongs to the big boss. He controls everything. Sometimes the next generation or the generation before loses sight of what life is really about, right? Nothing is promised. You live by his grace. And the only reason why I'm probably still here is because of him. And it's because of the message that I try to portray and impart goodness to the world. That is most important in my life. So once I realize that and put aside all of that vanity, then I have arrived. You see, but if I hold on to that vanity, it doesn't mean anything because that's going to go. You see, but the word of the big boss never leaves you. So when you can impart that to other people, then it's one of the greatest feelings that you can have in your journey in life.
And because you're so special, we're going to do a rapid fire question.
Yes. We're going to have first word that comes to your mind when we say each thing. Okay. What word best describes Joe Bataan?
Aggressive.
What was your favorite record to make?
Ordinary guy.
Who was your favorite artist to work with?
Oh, boy. Oh, that's a good one. There's so many. Shoo. Oh, you got me caught off there. I'm just trying to think.
No pressure.
Yeah. On top of my head, Harry James. I don't know if you remember Harry James, but that was amazing for me.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What new artist, Filipino or not, would you want to work with?
I guess hair. Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that.
I would love to hear that.
Right. Being around so many Latinos, what Latino food dish or restaurant should Filipinos try?
Oh, boy. I got a tip of my tongue. Caridad. Caridad Restaurants is a chain of the good food.
Okay. Favorite Filipino thing to eat?
Yeah, lumpia.
And last one, favorite Filipino word to say?
Oh, I couldn't say that.